The phone rang. A shrill, unwelcome sound that cut through the quiet afternoon. A sound that would forever mark the abrupt end of the peace I once knew. It was Leo's school. Mrs. Henderson. Her voice, usually bright and cheerful, now hushed, laced with an unfamiliar urgency. "Mrs. Davies, it's about Leo," she began, and my heart seized, a familiar panic tightening my chest. My mind immediately jumped to scraped knees, a bumped head, the usual childhood mishaps. But then she continued, her words forming a chilling picture I couldn't yet comprehend. "It's not about Leo's health, Mrs. Davies. It's about something he brought to school today. An iPad, his mother's work iPad. We found some information on it. We've had to involve the authorities." My breath hitched, a cold knot forming in my stomach. An iPad. Information. Authorities. What on earth could a 7-year-old boy innocently bringing his mother's device to school possibly lead to? Then came the words that sent a shiver down my spine. Words that etched themselves into my memory like a brand. "The police are here, Mrs. Davies. They specifically asked for you, not Leo's parents directly. They said it's a matter of extreme sensitivity and potential criminal investigation." My world spun, the familiar comfort of my living room suddenly feeling alien, threatening. Why me? His grandmother. First, before his own mother or father. A thought, cold and unsettling, began to take root in the back of my mind. A premonition of darkness that I desperately tried to push away. What unspeakable secret could a child's simple act of forgetfulness reveal? A secret so profound, it tore at the fabric of our family. And why was I, an elderly woman, chosen to be the first to bear witness to its terrifying unraveling? The drive to Leo's school felt like an eternity. Each turn of the wheel a further descent into an unknown dread. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. My heart, a relentless drum against my ribs. I kept replaying Mrs. Henderson's words, trying to piece together the fragments of what she'd said, each attempt only deepening the pit of my stomach. When I finally pulled into the school parking lot, the sight of a police cruiser parked casually amongst the conned parent vehicles sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. This was real, far more serious than any parental dispute or schoolyard mischief. I walked into the principal's office, the air thick with an unspoken tension. Principal Thompson, usually a beacon of calm, looked pale and stressed, her eyes wide with a concern that mirrored my own. Sitting opposite her, at a table cluttered with folders and a half-empty coffee mug, was a man in a crisp suit, his expression grim, his gaze sharp. He introduced himself as Detective Miller, his voice low and measured. "Mrs. Davies, thank you for coming so quickly," he said, his tone professional yet tinged with a solemnity that made my blood run cold. "We believe this device, your daughter-in-law Maria's work iPad, contains evidence of serious criminal activity. Your daughter-in-law, Maria, is the subject of a developing investigation." My initial shock was quickly replaced by a fierce wave of disbelief, then indignation. "That's impossible," I retorted, my voice trembling but firm. "Maria is a good mother, a dedicated professional. She works long hours. She's committed to her family. There must be some mistake." I was defensive, protective, unwilling to accept such a damning accusation against the woman my son loved, the mother of my grandson. The detective, however, remained calm, his gaze unwavering. He slowly turned the iPad towards me, its screen displaying a jarring collage of images and text. It was a nightmare, unfolding before my eyes. There were intimate photos, not of Maria and my son David, but of Maria with another man. A stranger, with a dark but intense look. Then came the messages, fragments of conversations, coded and casual, hinting at clandestine meetings and shared secrets. Financial transactions flashed across the screen, Large sums of money moving through accounts I didn't recognize, accounts clearly not linked to her legitimate work. My mind reeled, trying to reconcile the smiling, put-together Maria I knew, with the woman exposed on that screen. Extramarital affair, illegal financial transactions, highly suspicious communications. The detective's words echoed in my ears, slowly, agonizingly beginning to make sense. In a corner of the office, oblivious to the storm raging around him, Leo sat quietly, coloring a picture of a superhero. His small hands gripped a crayon, his brow furrowed in concentration. The heartbreaking irony of his innocence in the face of such profound betrayal brought tears to my eyes. My world, which had always felt so stable, so predictable, was tilting, threatening to capsize entirely. Breaking the news to David was agonizing. I called him from the school, stepping outside for some semblance of privacy. Though my voice felt raw and exposed, he answered with his usual cheerful greeting, the sound a stark contrast to the despair I felt. "Mom, everything all right? You sound a bit off," I stammered, trying to find the right words, dreading the moment I would have to articulate what I had seen. When I finally managed to tell him that the police were involved, that it concerned Maria, he initially reacted with a bewildered amusement. "What are you talking about? Mom?" "Maria. The police. Is this some kind of prank?" But as I recounted, carefully, the detective's words, the nature of the Blaine's investigation, his amusement curdled into confusion, then a fierce, unyielding anger. He met me at my home an hour later, his face pale and drawn, his eyes blazing with a mixture of fear and fury. "Mom, what is this nonsense? You're letting them fill your head with preposterous accusations. Maria, involved in something illegal. Having an affair, that's absolutely ridiculous." He paced my living room, agitated, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. "She's my wife. The mother of my son. You're always so quick to judge her, aren't you? Ever since we got married, you've never truly accepted her." His words were a painful blow, reopening old wounds, and old disagreements we'd had about Maria when they first started dating. I had always been reserved, perhaps overly cautious, about her, sensing a certain superficiality, a detachment that David, blinded by love, never seemed to notice. I tried to show him the police's initial findings, the carefully redacted summaries the detective had allowed me to take home. But he refused to even look at them, pushing them away with a dismissive wave of his hand. His loyalty to his wife, his deeply ingrained trust, he overrode all reason, all evidence. He clung to his belief in Maria's innocence with a stubbornness that frustrated and deeply hurt me. "There has to be a mistake, Mom. A misunderstanding. She's busy with work. Maybe a colleague used her iPad, or someone hacked her accounts. It's all a terrible misinterpretation." He insisted on a rational, innocent explanation, desperately trying to construct a narrative that would preserve his world. A world where Maria was blameless. The chasm between us, already present, widened into a terrifying abyss. The police, particularly Detective Miller, were surprisingly understanding of David's initial denial. They knew how difficult it was for a husband to accept such a harsh truth about his wife. He encouraged me to gather more information, offering discreet support without official involvement. "We can't act solely on your word, Mrs. Davies. Not with a formal investigation against a civilian," he explained gently. "But any information you can discreetly obtain, any patterns you observe, could help us build a more solid case." His words, though cautious, instilled in me a fierce determination. I couldn't let my son and grandson be ruined by this, by Maria's secret life, by David's blindness. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful, no matter the personal cost. My life transformed overnight. The comforting rhythm of my retirement years was shattered, replaced by a clandestine mission. I became a shadow, a silent observer. I started small, watching Maria's daily routine. Her work trips, which David always dismissed as demanding but necessary for her high-flying career, now seemed overly frequent, extending for days, sometimes a week. I noted the times she left, the clothes she wore, the way she sometimes glanced nervously over her shoulder, a telltale sign I hadn't noticed before. One Tuesday morning, instead of heading towards the city center where her office was supposedly located, Maria drove in the opposite direction, towards the sprawling, desolate industrial park on the outskirts of town. My heart pounded as I followed at a careful distance. Her car, a small, black speck in the distance. She pulled into the parking lot of an old, abandoned warehouse, its windows broken, its walls covered in graffiti. It was an eerie, foreboding place, the kind of setting for a crime novel, not a legitimate business meeting. I parked my car a few blocks away, tucked behind a thick hedge, and watched. Minutes later, another car, a sleek, dark sedan, pulled up beside Maria's. A man emerged, tall and well-built, with an air of contained menace. He wasn't David. He moved with a predatory breeding file, grace, his eyes scanning the surroundings before he embraced Maria. It wasn't a casual hug between colleagues. It was an embrace filled with an undeniable intimacy, a raw passion that made my stomach churn. They kissed. A long, lingering kiss that left no room for doubt. This was her lover. My heart ached with a profound, crushing sorrow for David, for the years of blind trust he had placed in this woman. I snapped a few discreet photos with my phone, my hands shaking so violently I almost dropped it. It was proof, undeniable, damning proof. Over the next few weeks, I became a phantom, a whisper in the background of Maria's life. I followed her to other locations, discreet cafes where she'd meet the same man. His name, I soon learned, was Marco, and sometimes other shadowy figures. Their conversations were always hushed, their eyes darting nervously. I started listening to fragments of David and Maria's conversations, too. When I was over visiting Leo, Maria would make excuses for her late nights, her missed calls, her vague explanations for the source of her newly acquired, expensive gifts. David, still in denial, would simply nod, accepting her words at face value. It was excruciating to watch. One day, Maria mentioned an upcoming charity gala she was organizing, requiring her to travel to a neighboring state for a week. David seemed delighted, proud of her involvement. But something felt off. The details were vague. The dates seemed to shift. I decided to follow her. This time, I took a train, maintaining a safe distance. The gala turned out to be a cleverly constructed lie. Maria met Marco at a secluded, opulent villa, far from any public event. I managed to get close enough to overhear snippets of their conversation through an open window, my heart pounding in my ears. Words like shipment, buyers, customs, formula, and most disturbingly, counterfeit, drifted out into the night. It clicked then, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place with a horrifying clarity. Counterfeit medicine. The pieces of evidence from the iPad, the large financial transactions, the clandestine meetings, the furtive glances. It all pointed to something far more sinister than just an affair. The next day, I contacted Detective Miller again, my voice filled with a newfound certainty. I laid out everything I had observed, the photos I had taken, the overheard conversations. He listened patiently, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. "Mrs. Davies," he finally said, his voice grave, "what you've uncovered is significant. Counterfeit pharmaceuticals, especially on this scale, are a serious federal offense. This isn't just about an affair anymore. This is about public safety, about a criminal enterprise that could endanger countless lives." He explained the next steps. They would now be able to initiate a more formal investigation, using my information as a foundation. They needed more concrete evidence, of course. surveillance that would stand up in court. He introduced me to Agent Sarah Jenkins, a seasoned FBI agent specializing in organized crime. Agent Jenkins was sharp, no nonsense, but she treated me with respect, recognizing the courage it took to expose my own family. The weeks that followed were a blur of hushed meetings with the agents, late-night phone calls, and constant vigilance on my part. I felt like a character in a spy novel, my ordinary life replaced by a presidi world of intrigue and danger. My heart was heavy, not just with fear, but with a profound sorrow for David, for the impending heartbreak that awaited him. He was still oblivious, still clinging to the illusion of his perfect marriage, his perfect life. Maria, meanwhile, grew increasingly agitated, increasingly secretive. I noticed her making frantic phone calls, whispering into her phone, her eyes darting nervously. She began to withdraw large sums of cash, making excuses to David about business expenses or investment opportunities. The agents informed me that Marco and Maria were finalizing their plans, preparing to flee the country with their ill-gotten gains. The net was closing in. The call from Agent Jenkins came late one night, her voice crisp and urgent. "Mrs. Davies, it's happening. They've booked flights for tomorrow evening. They're planning to leave the country. We need to move." My stomach dropped. Tomorrow. The final act. I knew what I had to do. I had to tell David. This time, there was no room for denial, no time for argument. The truth, raw and unvarnished, had to be laid bare. I went to David's house early the next morning, my resolve like steel. He looked tired, nursing a cup of coffee. Maria was already gone, having left early for what she claimed was a final business meeting before her charity gala trip. I sat him down, my voice quiet but firm, and laid out everything. The affair, the counterfeit medicine, the money laundering, the plan to flee. I showed him the photographs, the meticulous notes I had taken, the flight details provided by the FBI. He listened, his face slowly draining of color, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. The candid disbelief that had once been so impenetrable finally cracked, shattering into a million pieces. He looked at the pictures of Maria and Marco, their faces close, their hands entwined, and a guttural sound escaped his throat, a sound of pure agony. He didn't scream. He didn't shout. He simply sat there, utterly broken, tears silently streaming down his face. "All this time," he whispered, his voice raw, "all this time, I defended her. I thought you were just being critical, Mom. I thought she loved me." My heart broke for him, for the devastation that had consumed him. I wrapped my arms around my son, holding him as he wept, his body shaking with profound grief and betrayal. Agent Jenkins arrived a short while later, having arranged to meet us there. She spoke to David with gentle professionalism, explaining the full extent of Maria's crimes, the danger she and Marco posed, the meticulously planned escape. She outlined the sting operation they had devised for that evening at the airport. "David," she said, her voice firm, "we need your help. We need you to be there. We need Maria to believe you're saying goodbye, that you're none the wiser. It's the only way to ensure their capture." David hesitated, his eyes still red and swollen. "I can't," he choked out. "I don't know if I can face her. To pretend. To see her one last time, before she's gone." But then he looked at me, at the concern etched on my face, and then he looked at a photograph of Leo, beaming innocently from the mantelpiece. The resolve hardened in his eyes. "I'll do it," he said, his voice hoarse but determined. "For Leo. For us. For the truth." That evening, the airport terminal buzzed with the usual symphony of departures and arrivals, a cacophony of hurried goodbyes and joyful reunions. For us, it was a stage for a much darker drama. David and I stood near the gate, blending in with the throngs of travelers, our hearts pounding in unison. David looked pale, his face a mask of practiced calm, but I could feel the tremor in his hand as I held it. FBI agents, disguised as ordinary passengers and airport personnel, were subtly positioned around us, their presence a silent, reassuring force. Then, I saw her, Maria, radiating an air of excitement and self-importance, walking hand in hand with Marco. She was dressed impeccably, a designer scarf, tied artfully around her neck, a carry-on bag slung over her shoulder. They laughed, a light, carefree sound that felt like a knife twisting in my gut. My son, my poor son, watched her with a raw pain in his eyes that was almost unbearable to witness. He had given her everything, his trust, his love, his future, and she had traded it for a life of crime, for this man, for a cynical escape. David straightened his shoulders, took a deep breath, and walked towards them, a strained smile on his face. "Maria, Marco," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. Maria's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of surprise, perhaps even annoyance, in her eyes. "David, darling, what are you doing here? I thought you were at home with Leo." Her voice was sweet, but there was an undercurrent of impatience. Marco, meanwhile, simply nodded. His eyes narrowed, a predatory glint in them. "I just wanted to see you off, Maria," David replied, his voice a little too bright, a little too forced. "I wanted to wish you a good trip." He reached out, hesitantly, to touch her arm. Maria, however, recoiled, almost imperceptibly, a subtle movement that spoke volumes. "It's fine, David. You didn't have to come all this way. It's just a business trip, remember?" And then, she said it. Words that would haunt David for years. Words that stripped away the last vestiges of his denial and plunged him into the icy depths of her contempt. "Honestly, David, sometimes you're so utterly predictable. So naive. Just like your mother." She glanced at me, a quick, dismissive flick of her eyes, a sneer twisting her lips. Always so trusting, so easily fooled. We were just about to leave. It's a bit of a rush, you know. At that precise moment, a signal was given. Agent Jenkins, her voice clear and authoritative. I stepped forward. "Maria Rodriguez, Marco Rossi, you are under arrest." The terminal, which had moments before been a blur of sounds and motion, seemed to freeze. Passengers turned, their conversations dying on their lips. Uniformed officers, who had been indistinguishable from the crowd, materialized from every direction, moving with practiced efficiency. Maria's eyes, wide with shock, darted frantically. Marco, momentarily stunned, recovered quickly, his hand instinctively reaching for something beneath his jacket. But the officers were faster, their movements precise and decisive. He was disarmed and cuffed in seconds. Maria, her face contorted in a mask of rage and disbelief, struggled against the officers. "You can't do this. This is a mistake. David, tell them. Tell them this is a misunderstanding." Her voice, now shrill and desperate, cut through the stunned silence. David stood there, frozen, his face a canvas of conflicting emotions, shock, grief, anger, and a profound, bone-deep hurt. He said nothing. He simply stared at her, his eyes hollow. Maria's gaze found mine, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a flash of pure hatred. "You," she hissed, her voice venomous. "You old busybody. You ruined everything. You always did hate me." It was a cruel, desperate lashing out, but it confirmed everything. She was exposed, her carefully constructed lies crumbling around her. As the officers led them away, Maria still protesting, still trying to maintain an air of indignant innocence, her eyes met David's one last time. There was no remorse, no apology, just a cold, calculating fury. He had witnessed it all: the betrayal, the contempt, the complete lack of regard she had for him, for their family. The woman he had loved, the mother of his child, was a stranger, a criminal, a deceitful stranger. His shoulders slumped, and he sagged against me, his body trembling uncontrollably. "Mom," he choked out, his voice a raw whisper. "She really did it. She really did this to us." I held him tightly, my own tears finally falling, a silent commiseration for the shattered pieces of his life. The immediate aftermath was a desolate landscape of shattered trust and profound grief. David retreated into himself, a hollow shell of the man he once was. The news, once it broke, was a firestorm. Local and national media outlets descended upon our lives, sensationalizing every detail of Maria's double life. The illicit enterprise, the attempted escape. Our family, once private and unassuming, was thrust into the harsh glare of public scrutiny. Our pain, a spectacle for curious onlookers. Leo, insulated as much as possible, still sensed the seismic shift in our world. He asked innocent, heartbreaking questions about why his mother wasn't home, why his father was always sad, why there were so many strangers at our house. Explaining the incomprehensible to a 7-year-old was a task of unspeakable difficulty, a constant tightrope walk between truth and protection. We told him his mother was away, dealing with some serious problems, that she loved him, but it was a flimsy shield against a harsh reality. David struggled immensely. He wrestled with feelings of foolishness, of having been utterly blind, utterly betrayed. He found it difficult to look at me, burdened by the guilt of his initial disbelief, of the pain he had caused me by not trusting my instincts. We spent countless nights talking, sometimes arguing, often simply sitting in silence, trying to navigate the emotional wreckage. It was a slow, arduous process. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. He sought therapy, a quiet, desperate attempt to process the trauma, to rebuild his sense of self. I was there, a constant presence, offering comfort, counsel, and the unwavering love only a mother can provide. We cleaned out Maria's belongings from the house, a painful, cathartic act that felt like an exorcism. Each item, each photograph, each memento was a ghost of a past that was now irrevocably tainted. The legal process that followed was long and draining. Maria and Marco were charged with multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and the manufacture and distribution of counterfeit pharmaceuticals. The evidence against them, painstakingly gathered by the FBI, including my own contributions, was overwhelming. Bank records, phone logs, intercepted communications, and the illicit inventory found at the warehouse, all painted a damning picture. I was called to testify. The courtroom was a sterile, intimidating space, filled with hushed whispers and the weight of officialdom. Maria sat at the defense table, her face hardened, a mask of cold defiance. She refused to meet my gaze, or David's, as I walked to the stand. I swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, my voice clear and steady despite the tremor in my hands. I recounted my observations, my suspicions, the agonizing realization of her betrayal, the clandestine meetings, the overheard conversations. Each word felt like a fresh wound, but I knew it was necessary. The prosecutor guided me through my testimony, meticulously drawing out every detail. Maria's lawyer, a sharp, aggressive woman, tried to discredit me, suggesting I was a bitter mother-in-law, always disapproving of Maria, fabricating evidence out of spite. But I stood firm, unwavering in my resolve. My motivation was not malice, but a desperate, unwavering love for my son and grandson, a commitment to justice. David testified too, his voice laced with the lingering pain of betrayal, his words a powerful testament to Maria's duplicity. He spoke of his initial blindness, his subsequent horror, the profound damage inflicted upon their family. The culmination of the trial came weeks later, a somber day etched into our memories. The jury returned a verdict of guilty on all major counts. Maria was convicted, sentenced to a significant prison term, a stark and fitting consequence for her egregious crimes. Marco, her partner in deceit, received a similar fate. As the verdict was read, Maria's face remained impassive, betraying no emotion, no remorse. It was a chilling testament to the depth of her coldness. The conviction brought a strange sense of closure, but it was not a joyous occasion. There was no celebration, only a profound sense of exhaustion and a quiet, somber relief. The pain of loss was still very real, the wounds still raw, but at least now, the truth had been spoken, acknowledged, and validated. We could begin the long, arduous process of healing, not just from the betrayal, but from the uncertainty that had plagued us for so long. The months that followed were a gradual, painstaking effort to rebuild our lives, piece by broken piece. David, slowly, painstakingly, began to emerge from the depths of his despair. He channeled his energy into Leo, becoming an even more devoted and present father. He started taking Leo to therapy, too, to help him process the absence of his mother and the emotional upheaval in his young life. Leo, resilient as children often are, slowly began to find his footing, comforted by his father's unwavering presence and my constant, doting attention. Our home, which had felt like a battleground for so long, slowly transformed into a sanctuary. We found new routines, new rhythms. Family dinners became a staple, moments of quiet connection and shared comfort. David and I spoke more openly, more honestly than we ever had before. The experience, though devastating, had forged an unbreakable bond between us, a bond built on shared trauma and mutual support. He finally understood the depth of my love, the unwavering nature of my concern for him and his family. He apologized, truly and sincerely, for his initial dismissal of my fears, for the pain he had caused. I, in turn, forgave him completely, understanding that his blindness had stemmed from a place of love and trust, however misplaced. Financially, Maria's crimes had left a significant mark. Her assets were seized, her illicit gains confiscated. David had to navigate the complexities of divorce, the legal ramifications of his wife's criminal past. It was a heavy burden, but he faced it with a quiet strength I hadn't known he possessed. He sold their house, a necessary step to erase the tainted memories and start fresh. We found a smaller, cozier home, a place of new beginnings, a place where Leo could grow up surrounded by love and stability, rather than shadows and deceit. Life was not easy, and the scars of betrayal would always remain. There were moments of sadness, of doubt, of lingering anger. But there was also hope. We learned to lean on each other, to find strength in our shared vulnerability. I saw David laugh again, truly laugh, a sound that filled my heart with a quiet joy. I watched Leo thrive, his innocence slowly returning, his belief in the goodness of the world gradually restored. The experience taught us invaluable lessons. It taught us about the insidious nature of deceit, the profound pain of betrayal, but also about the incredible resilience of the human spirit. It taught us that truth, no matter how painful, is the only foundation upon which true healing can be built. It was a long, arduous journey, one filled with more tears than I thought possible. But through it all, we held on to each other, a fractured family slowly, lovingly, rebuilding itself, stronger and more authentic than ever before. We had lost so much, but we had gained an even deeper appreciation for the enduring power of family, for the quiet courage of a mother's love, and for the unwavering light of hope that, even in the darkest of times, never truly goes out.